Welcome to the Lead Speak podcast series, where school-based speech-language pathologists grow their influence, elevate their practice, and design a culture that they want to be a part of. We're here to disrupt silos, drive change, and shape the future of our profession, one bold conversation at a time. Whether you are managing a caseload, motivating a team, or just entering our profession, your next chapter in leadership starts right here.
Hey friends, welcome back to Lead Speak. If you're part of our returning community of listeners, we're so grateful you keep on coming back. You're the heartbeat of this community.
And if this is your very first episode, welcome. We're thrilled you're here. Maybe you were scrolling and found us, or maybe someone you trust shared this with you.
And if someone did share this podcast with you, take it as a sign they see you as a leader or someone who should be leading in our profession, and we agree.
This podcast is where school-based SLPs come to think bigger, connect deeper, and design the kind of culture we want to work in, not just survive in.
Today's episode is exactly that. We're joined by the incredible Hallie Sherman, the mind behind Speech Time Fun, host of SLP Coffee Talk, and the creator of Speech Retreat.
Hallie brings real talk, real strategies, and a whole lot of heart. She's all about helping SLPs support older students with authentic connection, practical materials, and evidence-based practices that work in the real world.
If you've ever felt stuck with goal writing, overwhelmed by data collection, or just unsure on how to build buy-in with your students who really don't want to be in speech, this is the conversation for you.
It's the perfect fit for our Season 3 theme, Culture by Design, because everything Hallie shares points back to how we show up intentionally for our students, our teams, and ourselves.
Let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Hallie Sherman.
Hallie, welcome to Lead Speak.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to get a little bit of your time. You are one incredibly busy SLP. You are widely known for all of your work that you've done developing some really cool, very authentic therapeutic materials for upper elementary all the way through high school through Speech Time Fun. You also host a podcast, which is kind of cool, which is called SLP Coffee Talk. You facilitate professional development workshops. You've created SLP Elevate, the platform. I mean, there's not a whole lot you don't do. So why don't you share with us a little bit about your background as a speech-language pathologist and how Speech Time Fun came to be?
Sure. So I am a speech-language pathologist in New York, if you cannot tell by my thick New York accent. And early on in my career, there was not many school-based positions available on Long Island. I went from having no experience and there were jobs, so no one wanted to hire me, to then I had experience and there were no jobs. And I knew that school-based is what I wanted. And I was determined. I was like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get that job. So I hopped from leave replacement to leave replacement, putting my resume out every single year, went on so many interviews. And I was starting to get a little down on myself. I knew I was pretty decent of a speech pathologist. I was motivated, but no one wanted to hire me full time. So I then got this one job after I did my CF in preschool. Then I went to a middle school and high school. Then I went to an elementary school. And then I landed in a 5th and 6th grade building. And again, it's like older students again. And I'm only 5'0". So these students were taller than me. I did my grad school placement in an elementary school. I didn't have experience with older students. And there was nothing out there professional development-wise, materials-wise. And I walked into this closet of a classroom. It was a closet. And there was nothing there. And I was the only SLP in the building. So who do I turn to? What do I do? I was talking to myself basically, and trying to figure it out. And I made a lot of mistakes. I had all these goals that I didn't understand. There was main idea goals, summarizing goals. Why was I working on them? I didn't know. I was finding ELA worksheets. I was going to this teacher store that was in town at the time because there was no Amazon even back then. There was no Pinterest. There was no Teachers Pay Teachers. And I was like, here's a main idea worksheet. Let's try it. Great. And it worked for some time. And then it didn't really work that much. I was not feeling that adequate and that impactful. And I was not excited each and every day. And I had this student, we're going to call him K, and he gave me a run for my money. He made me brace for impact every single time he was entering into my speech room. And that kid is never absent. Those kids are never absent. Leave it, they will come to school with the flu, anything. They are always there. And he would torment me. He would torment the other students. I don't want to be here. This is, stupid, all the things. And I was like, I can't go on like this. And I only had him for 30 minutes twice a week. And I realized I can't just keep doing these worksheets, not like going through the motions each and every day, spending hours, racking my brain trying to figure out what to do to motivate this student. And I realized I had to start asking some different questions. So I started asking the teacher, the reading specialist, you work with Kay. How do you get this kid to work with you? And I found out he couldn't read. He was in 5th grade, reading at like a pre-K level. And here I am giving him 5th grade main idea paragraph worksheets. Well, no wonder he was wanting to throw rocks at me. He didn't want his peers or anyone knowing he couldn't read. He was very socially savvy. So that's when I was like, you know what? I need to do things differently. I need to really understand, why is he here? And how can I best support him and motivate him to work with me? How can I build that rapport, build those connections, and use materials that are appropriate for older students, but more simplified for students that are not reading at grade level? And there was nothing out there. So that is why I started making my own, because I found if I was looking up pre-K worksheets, they looked like pre-K worksheets. And that was how Speech Time Fun developed. I was like, you know what? I started trying different things and seeing different results finally. I always say the insanity quote is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I had to do things differently. And once I did, I started seeing students excited to come to speech, mad when I was canceling. And Kay ended up being one of my star students, and I actually got to discharge him and spare the 7th and 8th grade speech pathologist from having to work with him. She's like, thank you so much. Because once we realized what we needed to do to target and work with him, he just couldn't read. He was getting all the other services. We were building up his reading comprehension. His language skills were great. Just needed a different approach. I mean, all his tests and everything was read to him. We needed to build up that listening comprehension and the language comprehension skills at his level. So that's when I started blogging. I was the anomaly. Most people start at TPT store, then eventually they start a blog. I started a blog because I honestly thought it was going to be, I didn't think anyone was going to read it. I started as it's like a therapeutic journal, honestly. Like I was, watching my Real Housewives. I was like, let me just write this down, what I did today. And people started finding it. And there was nothing out there for older students, and that much, honestly, for speech at the time. This was back in 2012. And people started asking me just to create more, write more, put something on TPT. And so I did. And then that kind of took from there. And then I realized that I wanted to help speech pathologists more than just the materials. Yes, I'm creative. I can easily whip up a worksheet, a task card game in minutes. But I want to help support them in knowing how to use it, how to motivate them, how to inspire their students and get them excited to work with them. And that's when I started doing professional development. I was like, you know what? I want to be able to speak and talk to them and give them something different than what is out there. Back then, there was not much virtual things available and nothing really out there for older students, and not out there much where people walked away with practical ideas that they can use versus just theory. So that's why I started doing professional development. That's when I started my podcast and wanting to just be and do more for SLPs. I really love the field, and I want more SLPs staying in the field and staying working with those older speech students and not being afraid of it.
I love this. I love your question about why is he here? Why is he on my caseload? He's in 5th grade. Why is he here? And I think that for students who lingered on caseloads, we need to keep asking that question, because the why is he here answer changes as students grow older. They need different things from us. And I think less of an emphasis on maybe specific skills related to grammar, syntax, morphology, and more of a functional approach. But Kay was very socially savvy, and his language was a strength. He just couldn't read. Talk to us a little bit more about how, as these elementary students go into junior high, high school, how an SLP can shift to keep that student-centric approach going for the older students.
Sure. So yeah, so when they're younger, just the younger grades, it's the learning to read, and they're excited. They're getting attention from another staff member, pulling them out of class. They're getting a sticker. Totally different. You can do anything, and they're ready to be there. But as they get older, they're more aware of their learning difficulties. They're more aware that they're different than their peers when it comes to just learning. It has nothing even to do with speech, but like they're especially like they're getting supports in the classroom. They're getting pulled to the back of the room, asking for extra help. They're getting extra time. They might be getting poor test scores. Homework's taking longer for them. They're noticing that they're in a different reading group than their peers. They're noticing that like things are just harder for them, and they're losing that confidence. They're losing that self-esteem. And then here we come, that speech pathologist, that speech teacher person, taking them out maybe of music, art, things that they like, to make them do more hard things. That's mean, right? So that's why we need to, I love telling SLPs that we need to come from a place of compassion. We need to understand where they are coming from, how they view, not just coming to speech, in which it could be that they are tired of it, they're embarrassed, but also how they feel about school and learning. And if we can understand that approach and we have those, that's the best part about the older students. You can have those conversations with them. Hey, I get it. You don't want to be here. So how can we work together so that you can get out of here? That might be their goal. So we often as SLPs, we think their goal is that they want to do good in school. That might not be it. They might just want to have a specific job or make a sports team or ask a girl to prom. Whatever it is, we need to know what their desires are outside of the classroom, and how can we show them that we're listening and show them how what we are doing in the speech room can help them with those things. If we can't show them, and we're only showing them, hey, this is going to help you in the classroom, that might not be motivating enough, because the classroom is a scary place for them. They are turned off by it. So how can we show them that what we are doing is going to help them where they want to be in life? And how can we get them those quick wins? We need to start, I called it the Goldilocks effect. We don't want to be like too easy on our activities where they're like, this is babyish, I'm bored of it, I'm not doing this. And we don't want to be too difficult where they're like, I'm shutting down, I'm not doing it. You pull me out of class, I'm not getting a grade in this. No one's going to, nothing's going to happen to me if I don't do it. We need that happy middle ground. Not too easy, not too hard, using materials at their level and using their strengths, using a strengths-based approach. So if they're an auditory learner, how can we use auditory? If they're a visual learner, how can we use visual skills? How can we tap into their strengths to build upon their weaknesses and show them how they can compensate for things? They've been working on these skills probably over and over again for years in the classroom with maybe a reading teacher, with a speech pathologist, and it's still not working. How can we show them how to use graphic organizers? How can we show them how to use chunking of information? How can we use them how to use context clues to figure out these unknown words versus just practicing a skill over and over again and frustrating them?
Yeah, I think that one of my favorite things about older students is, you mentioned learning to read versus reading to learn. It's the same thing with the conversations you can have to get started and to summarize your session about learning to talk, talking to learn. Those meta-linguistic, metacognitive, very relational conversations about the work in the classroom, and then I guess parlaying those quick wins into, look at what you can do with this in the classroom. Look, this word right here is a synonym for this, but it's so much jazzier than that word. and on that they can immediately use in the classroom. So that's one of the things that I love about those older students is the conversations. If you can get them excited about words, excited about saying things in a more complex way, about just being a little bit better salesperson as they're using their speech and language. So I love that.
I mean, this fits really beautifully with the theme of the season, right? So we want to create different types of cultures, and we want to be really mindful and very intentional about what we're doing. And Hallie, what you're talking about is really like reimagining how we're building these connections with our students, right? You were talking about, asking somebody to prom, right? Or aiming for a very specific job once school is done, right? Like these are like skills and outcomes that perhaps has not been kind of like at the forefront of our minds when it comes to speech language pathology in a public school system, right? Because we're really, when we think about goal writing and that kind of thing, we're thinking about academic goals, right? There's also that non-academic piece and thinking about all the overlaying skills that it takes to ask somebody to prom and also self-advocate for accommodation and also succeed in the classroom setting, right? And that takes a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of creativity. So talk to us a little about that piece, that building the connection piece, and yet still living in a space where we're able to gather data and fulfill that obligation side of things when it comes to our services in schools.
I always say connection over data collection. So we need to build that rapport. And it's not just in the beginning of the year when you're doing those all about me activities where you're like, okay, I'm not starting collecting data yet. We're going to just fill out this worksheet. It's really taking the time and thoughtfully planning, even if it's just a minute, 5 minutes of your session. How was your weekend? What did you do? Who was there? Hearing about they tried out for a baseball team, that they got their learner's permit, whatever, by asking those questions and showing them. And if you have a large caseload, I get it. I jot things down and write it down like in a little notebook. So and put it in like your planner, ask, student A, if he made the team, write it down. So you have that quick little reminder, set yourself a Google notification so that when you ask them and follow up session later, or find them in the hallway and say, how did it go on whatever? They realize that you care. They realize that you're a human being and you're just different than another teacher in the building. And when you build that connection and build that rapport, they come to you and look for you when they're having trouble with something. I've had students ask to go to the bathroom and stop by my speech room to ask me for help with like asking a girl out on a date. Okay. They just felt comfortable enough to ask me for these things. Sometimes I wish they didn't, but that's okay. But when you take the time, and also like I let them learn a little bit about me as well. I don't try to be this authority figure like a teacher and better than them. No, I do a lot of activities about making mistakes, and I talk about mistakes that I've made. I don't need to tell them every single like secret of my life, but I can tell them that things were hard for me. Math was hard growing up and I gave it all my all and I went for extra. Talk about make up a story. Okay. If you have to, if you don't want to utilize any of your own stories, steal someone else's story, steal mine. There's a video on YouTube called Famous Failures, and it's like Michael Jordan, Disney, Hershey, Oprah Winfrey, all these different people and how they overcame challenges, and look at them now. Like what would have happened if Michael Jordan gave up and didn't practice basketball? What would have happened if Oprah, when she got rejected from her first talk show, whatever, I think she was a news anchor or something like that, what would have happened? We wouldn't know Oprah as she is today. So something might be challenging for you, and that's okay, but we can't give up. And teaching them that growth mindset and always reminding them of that. That's okay to like not know something. It's okay if something is difficult. We're just not going to give up. Even if I'm playing a game with my students, it's never about right or wrong. It's when you get it right, you will get a turn. And teaching them that and reminding them that over and over again in this space you're always going to get it right because I am here to help you.
Grad students come out of school in as an early career professional, primed for stroke counting correct answers and incorrect answers. And we also live in an environment in schools of measurement that tends to be more quantitative than qualitative. So give us some tips about the early career professional and self-advocacy that raises the perception of this anecdotal qualitative data as a measure of progress. Do you have any phrases you use, or do you have any way that you display your data so that your principal will give you a great appraisal? Talk to us a little bit about what the early career professional can do with data.
So in my early career, I thought I had to have a million trials in order to be successful. Like the more data, the better. But then as I worked through the years, I realized data was really just testing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more data I took, the more testing I was providing, and the less teaching I was actually providing my students. And that was the reason why they are there. So yes, I was getting data, but the data wasn't showing progress. So which is more important, more data or less data and showing progress? So that's when I flipped the script and said, okay, I can, as long as I feel comfortable in my answer and knowing how to explain myself, if someone came to me and said, why do you only have this much? I'd rather still say, look, they made progress. I think that's more important to show and to say, hey, they can do this skill with XYZ support, with this type of reading level, with this type of whatever, versus they can do it 9 out of 10 times but knowing no more than that. I'd rather feel more comfortable being able to explain more about how they achieved that data collected. So I always like to frame my sessions that one piece of data is data. In some sessions, I might have zero data, and that is okay. I have to just write 0% for the day. Someone can come to me and fight me on it. I don't care. But if I had to spend time teaching my students and they didn't grasp it, what data am I collecting? I'd rather write down zero data collected, spent the session, really teaching my student and helping them understand XYZ goal. So knowing that and being okay with that allowed me to then say, okay, I'm going to teach. My focus on my session is teaching. And at the end of the session, if I can ask them, hey, so what do we do when if your teacher asks you what the whole thing is about? Oh, you're going to say, who is it about and what did they do in one sentence? Great. You got one check mark. That's data.
Yeah. I love that, Hallie, because it involves a whole mind shift about how we do our work and how we approach our work. And we are really wrapped up in that testing aspect of our profession rather than the coaching, the facilitating, the explicit instruction piece, which is what our older students need.
Especially because our goals are annual goals. They're not expected to get it after the first month, the second month, the third month. So what you are measuring is really what you're expecting them to do at the end of a year. So by just technically taking the data on that annual goal, you're missing all of those opportunities to teach those fundamental benchmark skills. So I'd rather document what they were able to do, not able to do, what they struggled with, what support I needed to provide, so that I can remember the next time and build upon their skills over the course of the year, so that at the end of the year, they can demonstrate when I test them that they can do that skill.
I mean, this is so important when I'm thinking about we're setting those annual goals, right? Like the difference a good, quote unquote, a good goal can make towards outcomes for that student is everything. But how do you know if your goal is good, right? What do you see when you're talking with folks, you're doing professional development or you're talking about podcasts or collaborating? What do you see as some big mistakes that SLPs and the people that are training the SLPs, what are they doing so that we're not being conducive to good outcomes through goal writing?
I find often we write random goals. And when we write random goals, we get random results. Or we write goals that, okay, they need to do this skill in the classroom, so I'm going to work on it in the speech room because that's what they need. But that might not be the level that that individual student is at. So I like to look at, like, for example, when it comes to comprehension goals, I like to look at Bloom's taxonomy. It's a hierarchy that teachers are using to build upon critical thinking skills, and they're doing it over the course of maybe a month or 2 months in a unit. So let's just say they're working on parts of a cell. They're first teaching the basic vocabulary of the mitochondria and the ribosome, and then eventually they're comparing and contrasting the plant cell versus the animal cell. And the end of the entire unit, the students are creating their clay versions of a cell. I'm making this up. I'm not a science teacher. But that's over the course of the time. And they can't get to that final crafting phase if they never learn that basic vocabulary concepts. So when we're thinking about those comprehension concepts, if our students can't do basic recall, are they ever going to be able to answer WH questions on the passage, express summaries, make inferences? They can't make inferences if they can't even recall. And oftentimes, if you're working with older students, after fourth grade, they're not expected to answer WH questions anymore. They're expected to make inferences and do critical thinking skills. Well, if we're writing goals on that and they can't even recall a sentence they just heard, or they don't understand sentence structure to understand how the words are even utilized and what is even being expressed, or they don't have the vocabulary or the background knowledge of what is even discussed, they will never be able to get there. So we need to look really critically and do a better job when we're assessing our students, collecting baseline, coming up with these goals. The more information you know, the better goal and recommendation you can provide. Because if you're just picking something random or saying, okay, well, they didn't do this last year, so I'm going to try this year, where are they really at? Take any article and see how they do. Can they recall what was being read? And take something at their reading level, not just at the reading level of the grade that they're in. That's also the mistake, is I'm going to also just, if I'm using materials that they can't even decode, then they're really not going to demonstrate the skills because it's way over their head. So really, the more information you can gather from classroom teachers, the previous therapist, but yourself, if you can pull the student, the better. What reading level are they at? What's their learning style? And where are they at, like with Bloom's taxonomy is a great way to start.
It's almost like finding more meaningful data for that student rather than just saying, well, I need to do this quantitative assessment and I need to do 100 trials of this thing. It's finding tools and measures that are really truly going to give you an insight into that student, right? Like just, and this is going to sound super cheesy, but like working smarter, but not harder, right? So that you feel like you really know where to start. And like you're saying, like if the student is on a first grade reading level, that's where we are right now. And that's where we got to operate from.
Exactly. And also, if we're just writing goals based on like the standardized tests they struggle with, that's also not appropriate, not functional, and you're going to get bored and frustrated and overwhelmed. In the manual itself, it tells you what each subtest and how it correlates to classroom, academics and things like that. So you can easily see how they are doing and interpret it and say, okay, how is this impacting them in the classroom? How is this impacting them socially, academically, language comprehension? And how can I tailor a goal that they can succeed? We don't want to reach too far where it's not attainable, and we don't want something too simple that they're going to be bored and frustrated.
I think with older students, we can also spend some time thinking about like complexity theory and the cascading effect of if you work on something that's a stretch, but still within their zone of proximal development, but it's a stretch and closer to the level, the complexity of classroom language structures, that you can work on expanding the noun phrase or the verb phrase and the connecting words. You can work on clauses. You can work on subordinating conjunctions, but it's all within that complexity theory of working on something that they can achieve, and all of these other skills will cascade or fall beneath that waterfall, and they'll improve overall, which is also, of course, Hallie, going to improve their reading comprehension, which is going to improve their willingness to read, which then is the cycle of improvement of learning more vocabulary through reading, reading to learn, all of that. Oh, this is just so fun and so exciting, but it has to be meaningful and relevant, right, to that older student.
Yes. Yes. If we don't
Yeah.
have their buy-in, we're just wasting their time.
If talk to us a little bit about how you talk to students about their own data, their own progress. Do they own it? Is it better if they own their progress and know what they're working on and know what the expectation, the learning expectation is, and how to use it, where to use it, which class to use it in? Or talk a little bit about that dynamic of working with students on the value of data.
Yeah. So as they get older, you can have more conversations about, what is hard for you? Why do you think you're here? I used to have just a poster on my wall, like speech is vocabulary, communication, conversation. I had all the different like generic goals. And I'm like, which one of you is like, which one of these things is hard for you? And then as we're going through the session and going through the activity, part like I just conclude the activity at the end. So when you're on the ball field and your coach says this, or when you're studying for your learner's permit test, or when you're applying for the job at the mall, or whenever, whatever's, or even when in the classroom, how can you use what we just did to help you achieve that goal? And if they can express that, I show them like, then you can do it. And when they realize, like, oh, I can be successful, I can do hard things, they're willing to take risks when things get even harder. So, yeah, so it's not necessarily the data per se, but them being aware, like, hey, when you first came in 30 minutes ago, you looked at me like I had 10 heads when I talked about this thing. But now you can do it. You made progress. And that's part of it. You can have these conversations,
Yeah. And it occurs to me that it's not about data, it's about the value of that learning piece, right? To the student. Is it valuable? Can they use it? How are they going to use it in a real important environment to them? Yeah, very cool.
But isn't that the truth for like any learning at any age? Like, I'm just thinking about like when you are in a leadership position or you're in a position of providing professional development and you're teaching to adults. Like, that is like one of the essential core tenets of being a successful teacher to adults is helping the adult make an explicit link between here's what we just talked about. Let's talk about how you're going to apply it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like taking that time because it makes it so much more sticky for them. And so when they do walk into that situation, they're like, oh, wait. Like, I know this already because I know how to make that bridge. I know how to walk across that bridge. Like, that's how they execute the skill, right? So, like, I've always found that, like, finding professional development opportunities that teach me to be a better teacher towards adults helps me tremendously as a service provider for young people as well.
Yes, if we ran this episode where we were just quizzing them. So, you guys listening, jot down this answer. Why is it hard working with older students?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important? Like, would you guys listening find value in that? You'd probably turn us off. But instead, we're showing how ways to work with older students, ways to motivate them, where you're seeing the relevancy. You're seeing how you can use these things in your practice versus us just drilling. It's teaching and connecting and showing value. And it doesn't have to take that long. We often think with working with the older ones that we have to use the curriculum for it to be relevant. Well, the curriculum is probably boring. Students are probably working at different parts of the curriculum. So let's be real here. And getting the teachers to let you know what they're working on, probably impossible. When you have a large caseload, busy time, you're seeing their students while they're on their prep period, so you never even have a chance to communicate with them. Instead, we need to teach what's relevant to them, and it might not be curriculum.
It's like you're reading my mind, Hallie. I want to talk about clinical excellence, right? Because that is such an important topic, right? We know that evidence-based practice and clinical excellence is what differentiates us as speech language pathologists from perhaps other individuals, right? Like we have the training, we have the ongoing training to really help our students out. But the fact of the matter is that working in a school system during the last week of April, going into May, things are flying right now, right? Things are busy. We're wrapping up evaluations. We're doing graduation IEP meetings. Like there's a lot of stuff happening. So how do you balance that? Like how do you balance like showing up for a student and having these conversations with them and like really making things like super individualized and authentic to their needs? And also respecting the aspect of our job which really demands us to be clinically really excellent where we're working.
I learned that I couldn't be so hard on myself, especially working with large caseloads in the schools. Like little progress, slow progress is still progress. And some days you just need to throw out the lesson plan, and that's okay. Like you might have all the plans in the world. You might have this really cute Jeopardy game ready to go. And they came in and something happened at lunch that they want to talk about. Something happened at gym. Something happened over the weekend. And sometimes you need to be able to pivot. And understanding how you can easily take any conversation, any activity, and tailor it to meet any speech and language goal. You can take that conversation about what happened at lunch in the cafeteria and still work on, coordinating conjunctions. You can still work on context clues. You can easily adapt it, and this way it makes it relevant. Just show them, throw some fancy words in your conversation. Talk about the summary of what happened and using concise and meaningful language. You can talk about perspective taking. You can use whatever you need to do. You can have that just conversation and tailor in those things. And sometimes, especially this time of the year, that's okay. It's more meaningful. You're going to get more out of it when the students, when they see that, like, okay, she allowed me to like vent. She allowed me to, they're going to trust you more when things get challenging. So don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay.
What advice do you have for SLPs who are shifting from years of experience working in an elementary, early childhood setting to working with these older students in terms of, like the first 5 things they should do? Is it attitude? Is it materials? Is it training? What do you recommend just to get into a happy groove that is productive for the older students?
One is realize they're just bigger kids. They still like games. They still like candy. And they still like having fun. So they're just bigger versions of those little ones. And just taking the time to build that rapport. If you jump right into goal setting and taking data, they are not going to trust you. So take the time, get to know them, let them get to know you. Steal my ideas, steal that famous failure video, talk about all about. There is a free learning style quiz. I think it's education. If you Google free learning style quiz, I like to take the time, have my students fill it out. I fill it out. It's 20 questions online. This way you get to learn their learning styles. They get to learn their learning styles. They can learn about your learning styles. Talk about interests. Find out things they're into these days. Learn the slang words, Riz, Sigma, all those things, because they're going to be saying it. Just letting you know. But then taking the time and showing them when you're using these activities, how it tailors to their interests and their desires, goals. Spend the time in the beginning doing those things. Even if it means you're not working on goals right away, it's going to set the rest of the year up for success.
So here is something that I struggled with in my time in leadership, and maybe you would, if you could talk to me a couple of years ago, maybe you could help me through this situation. And this pertains to data taking. Okay. So the way that SLPs are scheduled in the schools is very fast, right? Like we're talking about like back to back to back to back sessions with God forbid, a lunch break, just to see all the students and whatnot. And the problem, or one of the problems with that kind of schedule setup, is when do you take data, right? And how do you take data? Because so many professionals are moving towards more electronic type of data taking, right? Like we have to show our data through maybe a Medicaid system, right? Or some kind of electronic educational record keeping system for IEPs and whatnot. So the days of just having a notebook on your desk and all your data, they're perhaps fading away for some of our friends. And so that adds an extra layer of burden when it comes to finding the time to crack open your computer, logging on to whatever system is happening, and like taking down your data. So what advice would you give to folks who are leading a team and trying to get their teams to like migrate to that kind of system while still honoring just the real realities of like, I have back-to-back sessions for 8 hours today. I don't have time for electronic documentation.
It's finding a system that works best for you. So I used to, and I have, it's free in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. It's a group data sheet, and I would double side it and laminate it and use a dry erase marker and keep it on a clipboard. And it's slots for the entire groups of the day, and I'll plug in the groups, plug in the goals in the morning. And like I said, I'm not taking data my entire session. So at the end of the session, I would quickly collect my data, write my anecdotal data, and just leave it and move on to the next session. And at the end of the day, when I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, what am I going to teach them the next time? I was a data binder girl. I put it into a binder where I had tabs for every student. And then I still then transferred it over to like a Medicaid thing, whatever, after that. But that just worked best for me. But if I was going the digital data route, I would still take my paper notes and transfer it at the end of the day while I'm sitting there cleaning up, thinking about what I'm going to do the next time, and just transfer it over to the digital documentation. But I needed something quick in the moment to just jot things down, because let's be real, if we say we'll write it down and not, we will forget. I don't remember what I ate for breakfast today. So that's what I used to do. That's what worked best for me. If you are a sticky note person, have sticky notes ready to go on your lap somewhere. Write something down and then transfer it over later if you have to. Or if you are fortunate enough to have a Chromebook or an iPad right next to you, you can do that. I like to focus more on the students in front of me than having to manage a lot of stuff. So if I can just jot something quickly down and transfer it later, I'd rather do that.
Yeah, I agree, Hallie. I think that I'm not coordinated enough to manage a screen just in time during therapy. I can't do an iPad or a Chromebook or even my phone for tracking data while I'm trying to be engaging with students. And I don't want to be on a screen if they're doing independent work in pairs or on their own or whatever. I don't want to be on a screen because that's distracting to them. So I would tend to agree that I would have to do a quick laminated sheet like you're doing, and then transfer it, and then you can also reflect on it, and it's formative data, right? Mm-hmm. That is helping you shape your next day's or your next session's focus or sponge activity or grab you moment because of something that they said in this session. You got to, and I have to make a note to myself to remember, because so many young people. Yeah.
See, I'm kind of the opposite, actually, for a lot of my students and clients is I have my device out, right? So whether it's my laptop or iPad, I have their data sheet up, and then finding those little pockets of time in that interaction where I'm just like quick noting down my data and then going back over and maybe like writing a complete sentence after the fact. Or also for some other students, what I find is reflecting with them like, oh, we just did this thing. So what I saw was this, this, and this. How did it feel to you? Right. And then together we will note the data. Right. And so then then it's more of a joint effort. So it brings, like what we talked about before, like a little bit more awareness and ownership of like what we're actually working on. And then if I'm super clever that day and really caffeinated, then maybe I scroll back up to the previous session and say, hey, last session you did this, and this session you did this, just as a pathway marker of where we're going.
And I think that just reflects and says that there's no right or wrong way of collecting data as long as it's being done.
Right. To whatever the standard is for where you are. Right.
And being okay with like your colleague next door, your best friend might be doing it this way. That doesn't mean that's the only way to do things. Try different things, especially if you're beginning SLP, or even if you're new to the schools or wanting to change things up. Try it. What's the worst that happens? You go back to your previous way of doing things.
I mean, that's okay. So let's talk about that for a second, right? Like trying it, right? Like giving yourself a chance to just like try it, like really earnestly, like trying the thing to see if it works for you and for that student, right? Like I'll give you a terrible example. I just got a new iPad last week, right? And I got a really fancy pencil, like the iPad pencil. I'm feeling really snazzy. Okay. I am very consciously like practicing using my pencil and my iPad because I know this is like a new skill set for me. And so like I need to practice writing in it because there's like different things you can do with it. You can click on the pencil to change the marker style or whatever. But I know that if I don't practice, that $100-something I spent on that pencil will have been a waste because I'm like, well, this is too hard. I'm just going to go back to using my keyboard and my iPad, right? So just like giving myself a little bit of space and time to actually practice this thing before I pass judgment as to whether or not that thing is going to work for me.
Being patient, being flexible, and being truthful to yourself. That's all that you can do.
So, Hallie, you've done a lot with materials. You've done a lot with talking about data collection and relationship over data collection, connection over data collection. I love that snazzy, almost alliteration there. And then you've also migrated over into professional learning for SLPs because of the profession that you love so much. Talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about your inspiration for the speech retreat, your favorite topics, or the needs that you see out in our community that drive your planning for the speech retreat. Just tell us all of that.
Sure. So I realized back in 2017, 2018, I was like, this was pre-COVID. So speech retreat was in person then. And I was like, I would love to I saw like in the teacher space, they were doing these big conferences where they're celebrating and it's hands-on, and there was like make and takes and all these fun things. And I was like, I could do it. Sure. Why not? So I did. And because of COVID, it switched to being virtual, which honestly, I prefer it this way. More people can attend. It's laid back. But I wanted to be able to provide a celebration of the field that we love, a day of being able to talk to like-minded other speech language pathologists versus sitting at home watching a recorded something by yourself. So often we are the only SLP in a school, maybe the only SLP in a district, feeling very alone and unsure, and sometimes hearing that others are having same questions, same uncertainties, having same struggles, and same enjoyment kind of make you not feel alone. And it's all about community. And if you don't feel like you're so alone, you will love the field so much more. And when you realize that there is the support out there and you can actually go and learn something that you can use the very next day. So I love doing sessions on just like, here are 30 activities you can do in 30 seconds or less of planning. And just, how you can just literally take your receipt from your coffee run and use that to work on an inferencing lesson with your students. That sometimes you might have to just plan something in minutes, and I love being able to provide the ideas to show you how to do that. So if you can find more joy in what you're doing each and every day, you're going to keep doing it and keep showing up and keep having an impact on your students. So I love bringing together different speakers that are doing amazing things in the field in the topics of AAC, apraxia, gestalt language processing, all the things, even just mindset and avoiding burnout. We have topics on setting boundaries and working in different settings in case you are thinking about switching to not school age anymore. But if you are working with school age children and looking for practical and fun professional development, speech retreat, the next one will be in July.
Well, as I've attended in person a speech retreat in 2019, when you guys came out to Austin, or not Austin, you were here in Houston. Yeah, in Houston, which was like super cool. I can definitely attest to like the real practicality of like what you offered. And I got to meet Natalie Snyder in person, and that just made my heart so happy on so many different levels. So thank you for putting that together. I know that's a really impactful, and like what I really like about speech retreat is like it's just so timely. You know, like if you've ever done presenting at the state level or national level, you know that like you have to submit that call to paper like 6 months out, 9 months out, right? And then there's a whole like process that goes along with it. And with speech retreat, like you guys are bringing together speakers that are talking about things that are like really hot right now and like continue to be so important to how we practice. And I just as a fan, I just really appreciate that.
We literally take the feedback from the attendees and what topics they want to speak and speakers they want to hear, and we reach out and bring them in the next time. So it's basically professional development created by the people for the people. So, and also we make it fun. I have a photo booth. We play games. I feel like Oprah, like you get a car, and do giveaways and try to make it as fun as.
There was so much swag. Like there's so much. I still have. I think like behind me in my bookshelf, I have the cup from that you gave us. So big fan. So keep on doing that thing because that's really really awesome. Well, Hallie, with every single guest that we have on this show, we always kind of go and ask a couple of questions, just life beyond speech pathology, because we're always trying to find just that a little bit more of a balance in perhaps our professional lives and our personal lives. So can you share with us a book, a podcast, or a song that you've really enjoyed recently?
Ooh. I did read recently Just Let Them by Mel Robbins. I really love, especially as SLPs, we can often face a lot of negativity, and sometimes just learning how to brush things off was really impactful. So I highly recommend that book.
I mean, the let them let me approach, I'm still working on that, Hallie. If you have practical tips on that.
Just keep saying it to yourself and hoping you believe it one of these days, right?
for something. Okay, very cool. So if you had an extra hour in your day, how would you spend it?
Sleeping? Yes. Is that a bad answer?
That is an honest answer.
As a mother of 2 girls and running a business and all the things, I'd say sleep.
I mean, I think your intro at the beginning would definitely warrant some extra hours sleep. So,
and not like I would. I'm a horrible sleeper, but in theory,
at least it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. It's available to you.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the last question is, what is leadership to you in one word?
Ooh, inspiration. Being able to inspire, whether it's the students, colleagues, future SLPs, whoever you are working with and inspiring, how can you inspire them to just be the best versions of them?
I love it. Thank you so much, Hallie.
Thank you so much for having me.